of the piece, talking a little bit about process, and then a comment about Joyce's response. And then everybody ask questions. I'll guide this, of course, as we go along.
Okay.
And then some general discussion at the end about process, delights, surprises, difficulties, questions you all had. And I thought we would just also go in order from Out the Cave, Helena's piece, Living in the Body by Nick, In the Wake by Brian, and The Cut by Molly. So, sound good?
Sounds great.
All right. So let's start this out proper. Welcome everyone to our first poet composer discussion of the Source Song Festival 2021. Woo! I'm Anna George Meek, poet and mezzo soprano. So your premieres were my happy place. Thank you all. I'll be your moderator and your MC this evening. Welcome especially to our poet laureate and poet-in-residence Joyce Sutphen, whose poems are the texts for these pieces from her latest work, Carrying Water to the Field, New and Selected Poems. And welcome to our composers, Molly, Helena, Brian, and Nick. I thought we might begin, as I was just saying, talking about the pieces just one by one in the order that we heard them tonight, 5 or 6 minutes each, with the composer just saying a few things about their process and their performance. And then it'd be interesting to hear from Joyce with her thoughts about the piece and or questions. Questions being a key component of this discussion as well. And then everyone feel free to jump in with thoughts and comments about what you heard tonight as we talk about the pieces. And that's true also as you're listening on other platforms. Feel free to put questions in the chat and they're going to get relayed to our chat here on Zoom, and we can address those questions at the end of the talk as well. So let's start with From Out the Cave by Helena. And Helena, first of all, wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
I have a series of questions that I'm going to put in the chat, but I'll also read them out loud. Here they come. How did you select this poem? What drew you to it? And what was your process in setting it?
First of all, my collaborators, I was very lucky to have them, soprano Sabrina Charrington and pianist Maggie Hinchliffe. We came up with a list of poems that we like, and there were a lot of poems that were liked, and we exchanged emails. And through the process of elimination, we narrowed down the list. And at that point, we had a Zoom meeting. And so we had our top 4 choices that we submitted to Source Song. And fortunately, we got our top choice from Out the Cave. This is something that I really liked right at the beginning when I read, even though it comes right on page 10. I love the poem. It just never left me afterwards. And then we set out, we analyzed the poem separately. And again, we exchanged our analysis, what we have come up with. And so I started composing. And to me, it's the intense internal life and the transformative experience that is most appealing in this poem. It's kind of like coming from a very grim place and being awakened again into remembering this wonderful feeling of being joyous, the last thing you remember doing with your whole heart, the quotation from the poem. And so when I started composing, the ending came fairly easily. I could right away imagine it, going into boom, right into the light, into the world. Also, the beginning was fairly obvious. It's the connecting the two. This is where I spent most of my time trying to figure out. And the really interesting part for me was, to work with those wonderful flashbacks that occur in the poem, that series of ones, and that I think Joyce has talked earlier in the interview when this happened, when that happened, just, going through life, this incredible imagery in the poem, and the very interesting timing of each, because those things don't happen over the same period of time. And finally, I was very intrigued by the way this poem is constructed. On surface, it looks like it might be in two identical halves. There is the semicolon coming right midway in line 17, but it's not into halves. The first part actually takes over a much longer period of time than the second half. And I tried musically to reflect that. So the first half is about 2/3 of the song. So that was pretty much how I approached it. And so I can see that there's a very romantic work. There was a lot of slight tempo alterations, lots of rubato, which was very challenging in the virtual recording. And Sabrina and Maggie, being in different states, they did a tremendous job of doing this and putting it together.
Wow. Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Helena. That is the most astute commentary on a poem of mine that I've ever heard. And thank you so much for that. And it really fits with some of the things I noticed and felt in your beautiful piece. And hello to the musicians if they get to listen to this too, because they were so much part of, you weren't there, but they were playing what you made. I felt, that you did such a interesting and revelatory job with the various whens. I felt that not only maybe do the first whens take longer in time, and it's kind of a gradual thing that's happening in these various whens. You made them seem different even to me in the way that you connected them. I think I've always thought of this poem as a sort of philosophical, lyrical piece, but you made it more narrative. Oh, there you are. You just moved in the little boxes. So I felt that I could feel the third group, the third kind of section of whatever you would call, I'm thinking time or something, that those moved a lot faster, and you've cut into the fabric distractedly, and you've done this and that, and then suddenly there was a resolution on the word postcard. I really kind of felt that maybe was a balancing point or something happened there. So I thought the poem was just really so intensified by the narrative. And what question do I have for you? So blinking in the sun was one of the high points, and so was that passionate kiss. And are they related to each other in your thoughts about the poem, or why were those the two points where everything kind of went up and was emphasized? And then I want to ask you about the very end too, but first I'll let you answer that.
Well, to me, the word kiss was the highest point. Yeah. And so I felt like this is where the coming out into the sun, into the brightness. And this is how this ending is conceived, as this coming out into the bright.
Oh, yeah.
I was actually very surprised hearing about your association with Plato with this poem. Somehow I was imagining, I was thinking about HD and her poem, Fragment 113.
Ah, yeah,
And
I know that.
so maybe I got it totally wrong.
Maybe I must have inadvertently taken something from Hilda.
And I want to like say to you, Helena, and sort of everybody that, I mean, there's this constant conversation always about how much does authorial intent figure into the meaning, and what privacy does it have? So getting it wrong is not, I mean, that's not the relevance necessarily. It's it's not about rightness or wrongness. It's like what have we brought to the meaning of it? What's the meeting place of the meaning? So please, nobody talk about getting it wrong.
So the imagery of HD just never, I guess, left me. So this is how I would explain the ending.
Oh, so the kind of shadow as it slips in, it just keeps falling down farther and farther. I thought that was beautiful and right, but surprising a little at the same time, which is a great combination. So, any questions?
Yeah, does anyone have any questions for Joyce about, especially you, Helena, that you wanted to ask as you were setting the poem?
Is there a back poem actually that you were thinking about, or it's
no? But about that time, I was working on I memorized a lot of Shakespeare's sonnets, and so went to the sessions of Sweet Silence, thought those. I summon up remembrance, or when in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes. I mean, he likes that when, then, or then of some kind of resolution. It's so I think I probably from there.
Oh, I see.
Let's go through all of the pieces and then make comments, unless Molly, Brian, or Nick, do you have like burning questions that you want to ask Helena now, or comments that you want to make about the way that the poetry and the music worked together before we move on to Living in the Body?
No questions. I just want to mention that I love the way that you have the piano and voice interacting in the piece. I think that's always not necessarily an easy skill as a composer, but I love the way that you did it. So just want to get that out there.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking that, Nick, because I noticed that too, and I didn't know how to ask it. Thank you.
Okay, so next we have Nick's piece, Living in the Body. Nick, similar questions. How did you select this poem? What drew you to it? And what was your process in setting it?
Yeah. One of the things that stuck out to me when I was reading through all of Joyce's poems is that there were a couple, I think it was at least 3, but there were multiple poems that dealt with body and that sort of like physicality and like nature of something that's so like fundamental on a human level. So that interested me. And this one was like my personal favorite of all of them. And I brought it up in one of our like general meetings. And Joyce, you had mentioned that it was a poem that was very special to you. So I thought, why not? So that's what drew it to me and how I selected it. As for my process in setting it, I mean, form-wise, this poem is, 3 stanzas that all have a very similar beginning in that it's body is, and then, dot, dot, dot. Well, not literally dot, 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 but, continuing on from that. And so I wanted the music to reflect that form-wise. And so, I have the voice and piano always go back to that beginning with, going through the rest of it there. I'm sorry, I'm losing my words right now. but the other thing is like in the different stanzas, they all like, of course, have different meaning and different weight to them. Like the first two were almost, I don't want to say cynical, but more so like the things that like body is something you need in order to stay on this planet, and like talking about the way that it can like pull you down and weigh down on you and some of the sort of hardships or things that you can miss about like when your body is new and when you're younger and that sort of thing. But whereas the last stanza is a lot more, the word existential comes to mind, but I don't think that's exactly the right word. But it's a lot deeper and a lot more I don't know, dealing with leaving the body and eventually, you know, passing away and all that stuff. And so I did my best to carry that through the music. And the first stanza is like a lot more, like the voice moves around a lot more. The piano is a lot more fluid, and that it has much more sort of moving gestures. Whereas the second stanza is a lot more like lethargic and has these like very sort of stagnant gestures with like block chords in the piano that just kind of don't really go too much anywhere. And then the last stanza starts off with like an even more lethargic, just very like sedentary kind of gesture that eventually builds up until the last second to last sentence, and then one day they are gone, or the last part of the second to last sentence, and then one day they are gone, where the piano just completely drops out. So the form was the most important thing to me. So yeah, sorry, I hope that wasn't too long.
The piano just completely drops out. Yeah, that's a nice way to describe that. That was a nice move, I thought. It seems strange that a word person would begin with this question. That disembodied ethereal sound that you started with was really arresting, and well, I mean, when I thought of how to ask this question and I thought of ethereal disembodied, I thought, well, perfect, you know. I mean, so when did you think of that, and how did it grow? Because you use it again, of course, in the between the second and third stanza, and that is when. And then we have to say, I'd like to say something about, and then leaning and loving in the doorway. I know a whole bunch of poems by heart, but none of my own, so I can't quote it exactly. But the point where they're gone, it's the hot. That's the high point in this beautiful piece, and then it's like, no forwarding address, just so tiny after that. I mean, talk about some of that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great questions and comments. Thank you very much. The sort of disembodied part that you mentioned, with the sort of ethereal sound in the beginning and in the between the stanzas, and also at the very end with the singer, that was something I wanted. It was the first thing that I started, because I composed the piece through compose, meaning like starting at the beginning and like not skipping ahead anywhere, just going like from point A to point B. And that was one thing I wanted these sort of little moments between the stanzas to just have like this kind of almost like free of body kind of feeling, where the voice part just had just no words, just like just vocalizing on a vowel or just humming at some points, sometimes going between the two. But I really wanted that sort of like contrast from the stanzas, to sort of give that. I mean, you put it perfectly. That sort of disembodied, ethereal feeling. So yeah.
Let's Well, I think it's interesting that um, there were a couple places that I heard in a different way than I'd ever heard before, and that's with each poem that in the wake and the cup as well. I mean, it really is a different different composition, even though it has the words. I think that none of you changed anything except maybe Molly. There was a repetition that I like, so no problem, no problemo. But it's really different when the music comes along. And actually, I liked living in the body so much that do you have a question for me, Nick? Let's just kind of, maybe there's something you're wondering if I'm going to comment and I haven't said anything about. And it was the most amazing thing you put in the poem, and I didn't even mention it so far.
I'm not sure. I mean, the comments that I had about the poem in general, I had asked in our meeting way back when, our all of us composers and you meeting, and when I'd asked like this poem's significance to you, and you learned that it was something very special. But I'm not sure what the other question is.
Well, there will be lots of time to, after we go through all 4 pieces, I thought maybe we could talk about some things that you all struggled with in common. Like I'm already noticing in the ways in which both Helena and Nick have responded to the structure of the poem, and in like musically tried to, I think Nick, your word was reflect the structure of the poem. For you, it was stanzas. And can I just tell you how excited I am that you know the word stanza? And Helena said something different, like, or similar, like Helena, you were trying to reflect the duration, the weight of the poem and the way that it was divided. So let's move forward if that's okay. I really wish this were a 2-hour thing, like we could all sit, and I wish we were all sitting in an auditorium and like having sushi and you know, chatting. That would be lovely. So Brian, in the wake, I'm going to put the questions again in the chat. Let's start off with the same question: how you selected this poem and what drew you to it, and what your process was in setting it.
Yeah, well, one of the things that came up in one of Libby Larson's talks that really resonated with how I selected this poem was she talked about reading a poem and hearing it almost sing right off the page. And when I read this poem the first time, that's just the experience I had. And I was just like, it was probably one of the first 2 poems I read in the whole book, because I just kind of skipped around a little bit. And right from then, I was just like, it's probably going to be the one, but I'll read the rest of these just to make sure. But I could never, I always just kept coming back to that one because of the way it was, once again, structured, and the way it seemed to lend itself to different, like, you know, the stanzas each had kind of a different character with a different verse. And I'm always drawn to lyrics like, it kind of makes me think of the Talking Heads' Once in a Lifetime, which is one of kind of the recurring songs in my life, as far as like looking back and being like, how much did I really make those decisions, and how am I going to continue making the same kind of decisions and all that. So it was really funny to me actually hearing your introduction to it, saying, yeah, there was a flood that happened in '97, and that's what this poem's about. And I was just like, it's just about a flood. There's actually a flood, because to me it was such a like vibrant. I mean, you obviously drew such a vibrant metaphor out of it that I thought it could apply to anybody, like regardless of your, you know, the season and the weather. So that was really interesting to get that additional insight just today. My process in writing it, I definitely wrote the interesting thing that I had to say about it. It's all about absence. So I really wanted to feel like, especially when the text was happening, that it was like the floor had been pulled out from underneath the singer. So it has like kind of the interludes, kind of maybe the opposite of Nick's piece, where the parts where the piano happens are pretty fleshed out and pretty like there, and then as soon as the voice comes in, it's kind of like we get nothing, and it's like, what was that? Was that a memory? Was that a, or what was that feeling? So that was sort of the, and actually I went through so many drafts of the piano part, and I think what I wanted to have in the end was something that felt like there was more music there before, and that I pulled a whole lot of it away, and I think that's sort of the effect that came through in the end, was this feeling that something had been there and it's missing now.
You know that lyric from, oh, I suppose, I think, I can't remember the person who wrote this. It was a songwriter of the more popular type. And freedom's just another word for nothing.
Nothing left to lose.
And the word nothing, I think is such an interesting word. I would do nothing. This, and the piano stops. You did the same thing as
That guy.
Yeah.
That guy, wherever he is.
What did you? What
guy.
was that fancy
Yeah.
term you had for that? What did you say, Nick? I can't remember. You said the piano drops away, or the
Drops out. Yeah.
Yeah, it just drops out.
Yeah, I really noticed that and liked that. And I think the word, I mean, I think I sort of made that up for the interview about the floods and everything. I mean, yes, it did happen, but that it did happen. But when I was writing it, I was probably more interested in playing with the idea of the word wake and all the ways that that could mean, and actually thinking about it and hearing your rendition, Brian, I got out my OED, like this big thing, and it's on the kitchen table right now with the magnifying glass over it, because I think you open, I mean, it's such a little poem in some ways, but I was hoping it would be, enough. Of course, I didn't ever know that it would be so lucky to be clothed in yeah, that's like the words get to wear music, besides being their wordy selves. They're on they're flat. Yeah, that's pretty wonderful. Where were you when in the recording? You weren't that you weren't together like some of the musician teams got to go together, or were you?
I didn't get to be there for the recording. I got to be there for one session with David Evan Thomas was there too, and we all kind of fed back on it. And something I guess I talked about during one of the last meetings we had is they actually recommended some things that I was supposed to change, or that maybe would have been a good idea for me to change. And then I was moving and stuff the whole week, so I didn't get to change it. And right when I was like, I'm ready to change it, guys, they were like, we finished recording. And I was like, oh, okay. So, so this is just the original right out of the gust of breath that I breathed onto the paper the first time is what they did. So.
Well, Marianne Moore published the same poem called Poetry 3 different times in texts. So, when is a piece?
And that's shorter.
It wasn't the last one only like one sentence long or something? It was like
I too dislike it.
Yeah.
Ryan, one short question for you. If you had to add another instrument to the mix, what would you add?
Ooh. I don't know. I'd probably add like a whole choir. Just like breathing like little sigh, breathy, like like behind. I'd probably do something like that. I'd probably do something like that. What would you add? Do you have an idea?
Oh, I thought maybe a saxophone.
Oh, well, actually, the original times I played the melody were on saxophone. I would be like thinking the words and like playing the notes on the saxophone, being like, "Does this feel right?" And if it didn't feel right, I changed it. So, that's where a lot of the melody came from.
I knew there was a saxophone in there.
Yeah, there's a connection there. Yeah.
So as we start to move towards Molly's piece, The Cup, I want to invite the listening audience to start thinking about questions that they might want to ask of our composers and of Joyce, and of this very collaborative art form. So start fomenting those questions and put them in whatever chat option is available on the platform that you're viewing this on, and they'll be, as I said, relayed to our chat here on Zoom, and we can discuss them. So Molly, The Cup, same question for you. And again, like, feel free to respond also as you answer these questions to things that others have said. How did you select this poem? What drew you to it? And what was your process in setting it?
Thank you. Yes. So I have to agree with Brian's words in that when I first read The Cup, it was almost as if the words themselves were pleading for me to write something for them, make them a little jacket, as Joyce said, something for them to wear. They seem to jump off the page, and as Joyce and I talked about the poem, she talked about the ease of the words. They fall right out of the mouth, and that is a really good quality for me in writing a poem and setting it to music. Or not writing a poem, but setting the poem to music. And I was struck by the imagery of the poem, the economy of the words on the page packed a wonderful punch for me. I especially liked the line, "and the flowers in the shimmering pouch." I could feel the tea bag in my hand when I read that line. And I knew that this was just such a lovely image that I thought I could very intuitively develop a melody to. And it started happening very quickly on its own. I used the cadence of the words as a backbone for what I was writing melodically. And as I was beginning to finish it up, I started coming up with some piano ideas, and they were very, very calm and very introspective and very chordal. And it was like in the key of C major, and I was thinking, I wonder if this is, like, I know that there's no right and no wrong, but I was wondering if I needed more information on what I could think about with this poem. So I ended up talking with Joyce, and she provided some very valuable insight on the poem. She talked about its background of it being a scene in a cafe with someone that she has not seen very often, or someone that she doesn't see for long periods of time at a time, and how much she cherishes the memory as much as she possibly can. It's a very simple moment, but it's such an impactful memory because of who you're spending it with. And I understood kind of the heartache of that. It's oftentimes that all my friends are very far away in most periods of my life, and when I get to see them if for a little moment, it sticks with you, even if it's just going out for a very short coffee break. And just the imagery and the word cafe, 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 cafe. Okay, I'm thinking cafe. What's going to be the sound of a cafe? Joyce also provided some very valuable help in saying that some of the sounds of the poem were inspired in part by Dream Cafe, the album was one of them. I believe the name is Greg Brown.
Yeah, Greg Brown.
Yeah, and then the other one was Joni Mitchell's album Blue. And I, yeah, and I was thinking, and I was like, I think I need to listen to Joni Mitchell's Blue through at least once, and because I oftentimes have what I've recently listened to in my brain when I come up with a musical idea for the first time, and I listened to Blue and was kind of like this, like I was like, ah. And I listened to The Last Time I Saw Richard, and I think that idea, The Last I Saw Richard, kind of stuck in my head. And I was at the piano and I came up with the chord idea, just the bump, 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 and I realized that this was the direction that the song was finding itself rolling into. And I was very surprised by it. I was hoping I'd create something very calm and very introspective as I did at first, but then I just with the combination of a cafe, the adrenaline, the peaceful adrenaline of meeting someone, and Joni Mitchell all came together to create something that was, like Nick said, very similar to musical theater. And I am very partial to musical theater. It's a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine, and it always comes out in what I write. So that was kind of the basic process of me writing the piece.
Well, were you thinking of dance as well? Because all of a sudden I felt like I could get up and like tango or do some kind of dance I don't know the steps to, but the certainly the kind of dump, bump, 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 bump was there, and it felt like that. So I was wondering, in the very first word of that you know that's in the poem, and you give it a special treatment. Yesterday, well, I don't know if it's exactly it might be a little bit adjusted from that, the interval, but did you mean for it to also summon back the Beatles and Yesterday, but then in the cafe, I mean, it's kind of like a little fake out at the very beginning of the song, and I think it's wonderful.
Well, thank you, Joyce. Yeah, there are so many ways to write the word yesterday, and we remember the Beatles, I think, version of it quite well. I didn't quite have the Beatles in mind for yesterday, but I think now that you mention it, I was thinking of that motive, like yesterday. That's like a whole step down, and I think I did an inverse of that. I did want yesterday to kind of sit. I wanted to give it a little bit of a moment to think about it, because yesterday is given a nice amount of space in the poem format itself. And I did like the way yesterday was treated in the poem, and I kind of wanted to give it some special treatment as well.
Also, I wondered that the phrase "and how well you told the stories," and something happens there. It's almost as if things are going kind of sideways, and then it's like, and how, it stands up and it just lands kind of sort of into some kind of fireworks, and what was that? What was happening there?
Thanks. I think for "and how well you told your stories that fit into the hour." I am a singer, and I just received my undergraduate in voice, and I find that my process is very much tied to what I can sing and how I can sing it. And I was speaking those words. for some reason I felt them tumble a little bit during that specific stanza, and how well you told your stories that fit into the hour, and the parentheses around which lasted exactly as long as a cup of tea, kind of instinctually made me want to make that tumble turn into a sudden halt, and for the narrator of the piece to kind of revel in how important the moment is and just how perfect it is. I find that moment, that it was so great, and you did that, and you did this, and it was an hour. I think that's kind of what I was having in my mind when I was writing that momentum build up to that more smaller, more thin textured part.
Well, I loved the interweaving of all those things. So great.
Great. Yeah.
Great.
I loved the dance for all of you in the different ways in which absolutely every single composer engaged the language, both at the larger structural level and the line level and the sentence level. My first question for all of you has to do in part with you're talking about clearly an anxiety of having to set a poem by a poet whom you have to talk to at the end of it, and getting it right. And Joyce made this really great simile about your writing clothing or creating clothing for the words to wear, and Molly talked about a jacket. I was wondering, what for you, how do you think about the relationship of words to music? Is that true when you write, when you set any words, or did that change specifically with this poem? So I'll just say that question again. What for you is the relationship of the words to the music and vice versa? And is that something that holds true every time you set music, or is that specific to what you set this time?
Well, I guess I can say, for me, I kind of like a little bit to have the music just a little bit like fight against the words, sort of. Like in my piece, kind of the biggest dramatic moment that I scored was just talking about getting dressed and going on with your life, and it's just like the most boring, not like the boring idea, but like discussing like a very everyday experience, you know, to try to kind of dramatize this. So I kind of like to have a little bit of this like subverting, just to make you think about what's actually being said, and, or, you know, just to make you think, well, what's so dramatic about getting dressed and going on with your life? Is this really a dramatic activity, or what is this? That's, I guess that's what makes me think of that.
I would say I like to think of it ideally as a type of chemical reaction. And I like to find words that are looking for that thing to be compounded with, which is music. But I mean, of course, Joyce's words stand beautifully on their own. I do love seeing poems that that I know can form a really good final product with, and I do really like the clothes metaphor, because that kind of creates a complete look for something at the end. But I also like the chemical reaction kind of metaphor, because I find that when you take one really cool thing and another like thing, add an element to it, it can create something that's completely new, completely different, but is but still has those traces of those elements in there.
You know, I noticed that there were words that had emphasis from in one piece and appeared in another, not in all four, but sometimes two and two. And one was rain. Well, actually, there seemed to be a lot of rain in. I know it was raining. It was going to rain in the Yellow Cafe, but was it in from out the cave? There was rain at one point, and Helena, I think you did a little something, or maybe I'm imagining it, but I thought I heard some rain.
Yes, there were raindrops in the beginning and toward the end, where it sort of repeats.
Yeah. So
Start of the beginning of the second half, but it's toward the end.
And that would be appropriate with the kind of sort of structural balance that you have there. Were there any rain? Was it raining in anyone else's piece that I should? Yeah. Brian?
Yeah. I can't hear the sound of the rain is the very last line.
Oh, right.
And that was right, because of the flood and all that. And that was one of the decisions I had to make was, well, do I put the sound of the rain in there anyway, or do I just let you have to remember it without putting it in the music? And I don't think I put it in there too much, maybe just a tiny bit.
That always strikes me as a difficult decision. To what degree, and you sort of spoke to it earlier, Brian, like to what degree are you mimicking or imitating what's happening in the poem? Like, okay, Joyce wrote the word rain. Do I create raindrops? Or to what degree are you pushing against it, as you said earlier, Brian? Or what I think is interesting about what Joyce noticed about Helena's piece is that music has its own vocabulary, and Joyce used the word rain, but Helena used the sound of rain, right? The sort of, am I remembering that right, Helena? The in the piano part,
the little raindrops in the top register, sort of suggesting the rain.
Sort of like in dialogue in its own language, in its own vocabulary, speaking back to the vocabulary that Joyce uses in her poems generally. Mm-hmm. Did you all feel yourself doing that in music, responding with your own musical vocabulary to the vocabulary that you saw Joyce using?
I think in this particular, it might vary from from text to text, depending on the nature of the text. In this poem, I was really following the poem. I feel like everything is so perfectly laid out that I did not make any single change or anything like that. So I felt like I have it. This is right there. I have to read and internalize and represent it musically as closely as I can.
For me, when I read the poem the first time, I thought, this poem's already a song. I just need to make it a song. So for me, I guess I put a lot more of I tried to have elements of continuity pretty obviously throughout. And I guess I'm not the only one that conscientiously did that. But but to really emphasize that song-like kind of structure of it. What?
Oh, I was just speaking of consciousness.
Yeah.
It seemed like the phrase that you liked, Brian, or that I heard an emphasis on was I had dreams forgotten. And I don't think I was thinking of I had a dream, I mean, but whenever you say that now in the language, there's always kind of reflections. And so it just seemed like an intriguing emphasis that you made there.
I think I like that because I feel like everybody who hears that is going to hear it. And we've all, whatever dreams mean to us, we've had them.
Yeah.
And so to me, that was like one of the most universal statements of the whole thing is like, we've had dreams and then we woke up and we forgot them. And I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was,
hundreds and thousands, and yeah.
So I figured everybody would read something different into the meaning of that based on their own experience, I suppose is what I want to go on to say.
Yeah. Such as art, right? Yeah. It is a meeting place for meaning making. And that's one of the fascinating things about the art song is that there's so many people making meaning all at once. It's not just the composer, it's also the poet. But wait, there's more. It's also the singer and the pianist and
The audience.
And the audience, absolutely, right? And somewhere in that that meeting is meaning. Which gets negotiated between all of us, which is why I wanted to shut down the, did I get it right? Because meaning it's squishier than that, I think, for myself anyway. I feel like I shut down the conversation too early about the relationship between words and music. And I wanted to allow you to speak to that if I interrupted you, but I also wanted to, as we near the end of our time together, allow you all to ask some of your questions generally about this process of working together, words and music. So do you have, oh, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
And Nicholas, I was wondering, I was watching your song and my wife was next to me, and we both thought that some of the vocalizations in the middle going back and forth between ah and kind of reminded us of like eating. Was that like sort of part of what you had? Because it was right after chocolate cake too, and then it was after another line about like how hard it is to go on a diet, basically. We were just like, oh, that's a good little.
You know, that wasn't intentional, but I do kind of dig that interpretation. It was mostly just to get that sort of like, I don't know. I wanted to have the vocalization on the ah. I wanted to have the humming, and kind of going between the two felt like a very sort of like natural kind of gesture. But I like that interpretation.
I just keep seeing little funny things like and Anna, maybe it does have to do with the words that I choose. I mean, a poet after a while has a vocabulary, and if you took all the words from all the poems and counted them, you know, there'd be words that symbols, you know, the moon. I mean, certain things would appear, but in these in these four pieces, the word "gone" in "Living in the Body," and one day they are gone, and now the roof's gone in the wake. So I guess I just picked something that you two could talk about, and I think the word "gone." I mean, just listen to that sound. Gone. It's I don't know what its origins are. It sounds like maybe it could be Anglo-Saxon or something, but it's just a good word. And and did both times did things drop out? No, it was on nothing in yours, right? It was on
nothing.
You just did it on nothing. That's always the fun part of nothing.
I had gone and nothing. I had to choose one. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, different vowels have different palettes to them, right? And the different colors, if you're thinking synesthetically. And I think about, I heard a talk between Silvestri and Whitaker, and how like Eric Whitaker will actually call up Silvestri and say, okay, at the end of this line, I actually need a totally different vowel because the vowel that you've included is emotionally totally wrong. And which to me as a poet feels a little like scary and freaky. But yeah.
Don't you think you do that without even, I mean, you don't have to know a theory or anything. Your ear or your sense of things can help you. I mean, I'm a very inarticulate person. I don't like talking so much extempore, but when the pen's on the paper and I'm just searching for the right sound, that's different. That's a very different process. It's intuitive, and it's just maybe you developed it on a trunk of a tree or something. I don't know where you get it from, but
I was curious about the ways in which you all heard the music in Joyce's poems, and I can't remember which one of you spoke about this, and wanted to either get out. I mean, how did you deal with that when you were writing music, but there was music already in the vowels or the consonants that Joyce had written? Did you try to get out of the way of it? Did you try to reinforce it? What did you do?
I would say I wanted to make sure that music was listened to. One thing that's really been a good lesson for me throughout this festival is that poetry is just as much sound as it is sight. And it is feeling, and it should invoke all five senses. And I think Joyce's words really opened my brain into thinking audially when it comes to poetry. As I understand, I remember you saying, Joyce, in your interview that sound is a very, very big part of what you write down. And I wanted to make sure that those sounds were formed in the mouth kind of as much as possible. Like I could meet them in the middle as much as I could, that I could take a moment, listen to what sounds are being said in the poetry itself, and put that into the music. I prefer to go with what I'm hearing in the poem, and it's probably up to interpretation for anyone who speaks, because every person speaks differently. But yeah, I really wanted to make sure that I hope that the poem was listened to, that it felt like it was listened to.
it did. I'm speaking for the poems. They're all happy.
I'm glad to hear it.
How about as we wrap up, that this is maybe sort of like the penultimate question, like how did you reinforce or get out of the way of the music that you heard in Joyce's words?
I can take a shot at this one. One of the things that spoke to me a lot in this poem is, I mean, it might seem, I mean, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but like my perception is that it's like sort of like intuitive thing, but the sentence structure and like the length of sentences, the duration, the punctuation, that was something that like from the get-go I was like, this is important. I need to make sure that like the phrasing, the rhythm of the piece like carries this across. And
I totally heard that. As we were talking about, I wrote that down, like, oh my God, he's responding to the syntax. Sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you. And I have the poem in front of me right now. And one thing that I was going to mention that like the duration of sentences was really important. How like each stanza has at least one like really long, like very like flowy, not a run-on sentence, but like a very very full sentence to it, which I hope I conveyed in the music. But one thing I didn't notice until just now in this poem, I don't know if this was intentional, Joyce, or not, but how each stanza has exactly 3 sentences. I don't know if that was intentional, but like,
No,
I just noticed that, and I think that's really cool.
That's very cool that you noticed it. And next time somebody asks me, I'll say, yeah, I was aware. Everything Nick Slaughter told me.
As I wrote in the chat, intentionality is really overrated. There's so much going on in our brains. Brian and Helena, do you want to make some last comments about how you responded to the music in Joyce's poems?
I think it's interpreting the text is what something that I was really concerned about, and it with the art song in general, it's such an opportunity to get into poets' most intimate thoughts, and it's also for a composer, it's a responsibility how you interpret those thoughts and how you interpret the text. So that's something that I was, really was thinking a lot about when I was setting the song to music.
I suppose I felt, to me, it was just like what Molly was saying before, this feeling of like alchemy, of just like, I guess I was surprised when I went along and I was just like, oh, really? Nobody else chose that same poem as me? I was just like, it just seemed so obvious to me. I was just like, I sure hope not everybody is just like bursting at the seams to write this poem the same way that I am, because, but yeah, so it's interesting how just like, with my alchemy, it just seemed to kind of naturally sort of fizzle up into some ideas. And I guess I just really like the idea of throwing something away for the burning. I really like the idea of looking back and just being like, what if absolutely everything was different? And I was just like, I can hear the key changing underneath these words, and and then kind of being drawn back to reality for the last stanza. So it was very, yeah, to me, a lot of it was natural, and it was just a matter of like finding the pieces to get that feeling to come across in the right way.
So for you, the larger feeling, not necessarily like breaking it down into vowels and consonants, but like trying to get structural.
It was definitely like just what it was about and the way that it flowed from one idea to the next that really drew me in. So, yeah.
Well, this conversation could go on, and I wish I could take you all out for like beverages and we could just sit around a giant table and talk, because that would be marvelous. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for your incredible pieces, Joyce. As always, thank you for your poetry and your presence and your incredible articulateness. Thank you all for the rest of you who are here listening. And a reminder that on Wednesday, you're going to hear 4 other new pieces. Also setting Joyce's poems. That will be Wednesday, August 4th, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. You'll hear Joyce talk more in conversation with me about the poems, and you'll hear the premieres of the pieces, and then there's conversation afterwards. So just what a wonderful thing this festival is, and thank you for everything all of you have brought to this.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you all, each one of you, and keep in touch, and don't be afraid to use that email that I dropped off at the beginning, because I'd love to just say things, but for now I just want to say thank you for beautiful, beautiful pieces. I feel like I brought the flower to the master chef or master baker, and each one of you made like something so more rich and varied, and so thank you.
I think I speak for all of us when I say that we could not have made these masterworks without the wonderful inspiration and emotion behind them.
Okay. Absolutely. Thank you, Joyce. It was really a privilege to be able to work with your work.
We're lucky, all of us. Because I understand. I'm learning so much, aren't you, Anna?
Yes, and inspired. This makes me want to write more and sing more. I'm both, like more art.
Yep.
Well, I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and I will see you all in the art scene.
Thank you, Anna. This was really cool.
Thank you.